tonight we'll take a look at a different dimension of Prince Buthelezi's legacy with SABC International News Editor Sophie Mokoena. Let's reflect then. Sophie, good evening to you and welcome. And some of the highlights of Prince Buthelezi's political career. Take us into the international perspective and some of the friends and relationships that he built who were instructive in the formation of his political career.
Well, let's start with the organization that he joined at Forte as a young person, the ANC. He continued to have the relationship with the ANC, particularly when the party was operating overseas or outside the borders of South Africa, particularly in London, where the president of the ANC was, O.R. Tambo. We know that it was in 1979 where he went to London, and that was the first time the former South African President Thabo Mbeki met him. And at that moment, he was continuing to brief the ANC in terms of what he was up to in South Africa. And of course, we know that he also had a strong relationship with former Zambian President KK Kaunda. As you know, that it was in 1974 when he went to Lusaka, and where KK advised him to start a movement or an organization that can keep the fires burning in terms of the struggle, but mold it as perhaps a traditional gathering, so that the system is not aware that this is a continuation of the struggle. So he did build a strong relationship with the Kaunda family, and also with the then president of Nigeria, Olusegun Obasanjo. And when Olusegun Obasanjo was deployed by the Commonwealth to South Africa, when President Mandela was at Portsmouth prison, when he went to Portsmouth to discuss the issues that were related to the struggle and the changes that were happening in the country, that's where President, then the envoy of Commonwealth, Olusegun Obasanjo, spoke to President Mandela that you will continue with the struggle to fight non-racialism, but you even have a bigger assignment now to try and ensure that you mend the relations in terms of ethnicity. And Madiba quickly got the message that he was talking in relation to what was happening in the country, particularly in relation to the role of the IFP then, and perhaps at times taking a turn that was not anticipated or that was not positive.
In some of the eulogies we've heard this week, the one was in the memory and the remembrance of the transition to democracy, the important position that Buthelezi was given as our first Home Affairs Minister at that time. But what you're raising now goes one layer deeper around mending the ethnic divide in South Africa. Maybe just talk a little bit more about that and how that relationship between himself and Madiba blossomed and eventually came full circle to bring Thabo Mbeki back into the mix.
The relationship was cordial. As I pointed out, when Madiba had a discussion with Obasanjo, Madiba got it that he will have to ensure that he does reach out to Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi. That's the only way you could have stopped that tension and that violence that was spiraling out of control, and the system using that moment to really divide a black nation in the country. And therefore, Madiba's presidency was all about reconciliation and building a better South Africa, a better Africa, and a better world. And therefore, that is why he always had this cordial relationship with Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, even inviting him when there were issues that they had to iron out behind the scenes. And in many stories, you'll see where Madiba at times had a tough time with Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, but when they went outside for the cameras and the media and the world, and particularly for South Africans, they will find a way to be cordial so that that tension doesn't get out of the room where they were.
It had to be managed and contained.
It had to be managed. And then, of course, his successor, Thabo Mbeki, had to continue with that. You'd recall that when that monument in Thokoza was unveiled, it was him, Prince Mangosuthu Buthelezi, invited by the then President Thabo Mbeki to unveil that Thokoza monument, because that was part of trying to mend the relation. And of course, the relationship became even deeper, particularly after when you recall, when Mbeki was recalled, he was very, very angry, and he expressed his view saying that the country will never be the same again, and we saw what happened thereafter. And also, I'm told now that because they continued to have engagement with former President Mbeki, even attending some of Mbeki's birthday parties, he had made 2 requests before he passed on. One was that the former President Thabo Mbeki must ensure that he does facilitate his return to the ANC. It might not mean doing away with the IFP, but he really wanted his membership back. Secondly, he had pleaded with President Mbeki to facilitate or mediate between him and the king. As you know, that there was that hostility.
There was a schism towards the end, reportedly. Sophie, thank you very much for just opening up some of the layers and the depth of that relationship. And really, the last week since his demise has been a reawakening of the past, some of it painful, as we reconcile what his legacy in South Africa will finally be. SABC News International Editor Sophie Mokoena.